Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So recently I was contacted by Graceland Magazine, and they're going to be doing a series of articles on Elvis's voice, and they've got in contact with me because it's going to be a feature titled The Voice of Elvis Heard Through Expert Ears. And they've sent me 10 questions to answer for this particular article, and I'm very flattered that they've contacted me. And I did say to them, well, I can do an analysis video on Elvis's voice so that I could refer to his voice on screen in order to help explain what I'm talking about. So that's what this video is tonight. If you want to listen to the songs independently without the analysis, of course, there are links in the description below, so you can click on those. But I'm going to be working through this video answering the questions that they've asked me. So the first one is just to introduce myself, who I am, what I do professionally, how I started creating music analysis videos on YouTube. So my name's Phil, and I am a musician and I guess music analyst on YouTube. I do lots of different things, but I started out playing guitar when I was 11 years old, going right back to the beginning. But then I was in cover bands when I was 19. I then had an original band when I was 22, 23, and played in and around London. So just did the whole gigging thing for many, many years. And in my late 20s, that's when I started Wings of Pegasus, which was my band and my own original music. Again, did lots of playing live and did a small UK tour and finished third in the biggest unsigned bands competition in the UK, which had like 10,000 bands that entered it. So considering the style of music that I play, I thought, well, that wasn't bad, finishing third. But anyway, from then on, I started taking things online because it's just me that does everything. So I thought, well, let's get it out there to the world as much as possible. And because I've been teaching guitar for almost 20 years now, I was asked whether I could explain about particular effects and what guitarists were doing in order to get a particular sound with their playing. And that's how my analysis video started, just looking at different guitarists and explaining a few things. And more people started to watch the videos, and I got more and more requests. And because I sang as well, people are asking me about singers. And because I've learned to sing from scratch, I've done a lot on that singing side of things, learning how to sing through different exercises and chest voice and head voice and understanding my voice and explaining things about other people's voices. So yeah, that's how that all started. And somehow I've ended up where I am now, where a lot of people know about what I do and my analysis videos, which I've approached in exactly the same way for the last maybe 10 years now, where I just look at different performances and say exactly what's going on. The next question is, when and how did you first consciously perceive Elvis Presley as a singer? I'd have to say that being in the UK, I think I was only really aware of Elvis from his movies and not necessarily as a recording artist, because when I was probably 8 or 9 years of age, I'd see the movies being shown on TV and he'd be playing a guitar, and at that age, obviously, I didn't realise that he might have been playing the guitar and singing and not doing a particularly good job at pretending to play the guitar. Even though he could play the guitar in the movies, it really wasn't that important to be technically accurate on the instrument. And I think this is why a lot of people, not to digress, but a lot of people say, oh, well, he couldn't play the guitar and he always mimed playing the guitar, but he could actually play the guitar, and I have an analysis video on that just to prove that fact. But then in some of the movies, not that I was aware of it at a young age, that some of the guitar playing might have looked a little bit off. So as a singer, I would say probably not till my teenage years that I then realized, oh right, so he's a recording artist first and then did the movies afterwards. The next question is, how would you describe Elvis's voice from a technical perspective in terms of timbre, resonance, vocal range, register shifts, or vibrato? So what we're going to do is take a look at a couple of songs, Hound Dog and Can't Help Falling in Love, to demonstrate these different things. And when you're talking about just the overall tone and sound of Elvis's voice, I would say that it was unique in the way that it was a more covered sound and a more nasal sound. So it wasn't really bright, but it had its own distinct quality to it. So when you heard it from that tonal perspective, it was unique. But then when we start talking about vocal range, of course Elvis had a great vocal range, and he could belt in his chest voice, hitting notes at the top end of the male tenor range, and then he did tend to get a bit of a raspy quality as he ascended in range. What we're going to do is listen to Hound Dog, and this is going to be the isolated vocal, just to point out a few things.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. Well, you ain't never caught a rabbit and you ain't no friend of mine.
So when we're dissecting that vocal, listen to the variation that we get. When we first start,
you ain't nothing but a hound dog.
He's kind of leaning into that a bit. And you can see here that we've got the D sharp 4.
Crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog.
And then we're a little bit lighter the second time round.
Crying all the time. Well, you ain't never caught a rabbit.
And this is still the same note here when we get this, well, well. It's not as aggressive as when we first started.
You ain't nothing.
You ain't nothing. He's kind of pushing in there, getting a little bit of rasp on the sound as well. So even in this first phrase of Hound Dog, we get a dynamic shift. When we're referring to vibrato as well, which I have done in the past on Elvis's voice in previous analysis videos, he has such a unique and distinct vibrato that also makes his voice stand out. So already we've got this, the range, the change dynamically that he goes through, adding a little bit more rasp in the sound when he wants to. This vibrato that he has, with this particular performance being up-tempo, look at the way that he edits his vibrato. So what I'm going to bring on screen now is Can't Help Falling in Love, ballad, slow tempo. Look at the vibrato. So here, in this more up-tempo song, it's a lot more understated. He doesn't cover as much pitch, but then when we dive into Can't Help Falling in Love,
rushing, but I can't help falling in love with you.
We get the trademark vibrato that is covering, a couple of semitones here, and at points it will go even wider than that. But it's the speed and the fact that it is consistent the whole time, and it's something that Elvis would have done naturally. That he's not trying to do this. He's not doing it in a contrived way. This is just his natural vibrato. But it's interesting in that with a ballad, because we've now got more time between vocal phrases, he just lets his vibrato run free. And it is such a unique sound. Now, I don't want this video to go on for years, so I'll move on to the next question, and it is, which vocal abilities do you consider particularly outstanding in Elvis's singing? I think with this, it's probably a case of course, having such unique vibrato, it is going to make his voice stand out. He's got to have pitch accuracy, that's a given, but it's something that might fly under the radar when you're listening to his voice, because it's so engaging that, he's really accurate. Just looking here, the D3 being spot on, and then the vibrato kicks in and he just flows flat away from that. But you're encapsulated in the vibrato, so you're not really aware of the pitch drifting, but you know where the pitch started, which is, how you understand exactly where we are in relation to the instrumentation, and getting the relevance of pitch is bang on, and then he'll get into his vibrato. But getting into his kind of outstanding ability, I'd say it's probably more in a generalized sense that Elvis, as a singer, sang covers. Like, he wasn't writing his own songs. Now, what happens with that usually is an artist who writes their own songs and sings their own songs, they are unique because of their artistry and their writing and the things that they write about and all these different things that set them apart from other artists. What you've got with Elvis and what you had was somebody who was singing lots of other people's songs, and I know that songs were written specifically for Elvis with his voice in mind, but he's taking lots of popular songs that are sung by other singers, but he's still making them unique, which is something that's really difficult to do, to take lots of other people's songs and make them your own and sound different to the original. So let's move on to the next question. In your videos, you often emphasize both his technical finesse and his emotional expression. How does he manage to combine control and feeling so effectively? So again, I think this is something that's going to be happening subconsciously. He's just focusing on his performance and performing with as much expression and emotion as possible. But I think dynamically, he knew exactly how to sing for the song. So say, for example, let's jump into Can't Help Falling in Love. Have a listen to this.
Would it be?
I mean, you can almost hear, would it be? The way that he almost kind of leans into the mic. And that's the kind of thing that you hear, even though you're not really aware that you're taking the sound in with that much detail. You're hearing him lean in, which means it's making the performance more personal. I'm going to let this play on.
A sin, if I can.
And listen to the way, again, dynamically, when he goes down,
If I.
He's now getting so much more closure at the bottom and really thickening up his sound, in chest voice here. So you get that dynamic change, that it's now got so much more body in there. Again, that's going to make it more interesting because we're not listening to a singer who's going, and I can't help falling in love with you. It's not all at the same level. He'll go, and I can't help. Even there, help. Starting strong, and then going to more airy sound. Obviously, there's infinite detail in Elvis's voice that I'm not going to be able to demonstrate, but it's such an important part of it. So the technical finesse is part of the control of breath and vocal cord connection in order to get that and going vocal cord connection to air vibrato. So there's now air coming through the vocal cords. But this is something that he's doing naturally. He's not thinking about this when he's singing. So the next question, which songs or passages would you consider prime examples of his vocal abilities, and why those in particular? So, I mean, I've only really been analysing Elvis's voice in depth over the last maybe 10 years, and I've done a few analysis videos on it. So in terms of, getting his whole body of work and saying, where's the best example of his vocal ability, I would say that it is all the best example of his vocal ability because he applied what he did to so many different styles of music and so many different genres. So it wasn't like you could say, oh, his voice really suited rock and roll, so that's where he sounded best. And, with Can't Help Falling in Love and ballads, and the way that he made lots of different genres and songs just sound like his own songs when they weren't. And that was unique in itself. So yeah, I wouldn't particularly pick out one particular example or prime example of his vocal ability. I think the best example is to have a look at how everything sounded great regardless of the genre and the style, because in order to do that you've got to have a voice that is versatile. And there are many times when you'll hear a singer who sings a particular style and you think, oh, it doesn't really work. But I think with Elvis, you don't really get that, because it's always just Elvis's version of it, and it stands up on its own in that sense. Next question. Do you see any vocal quirks or imperfections that might go against classical ideals, and do they perhaps make him even more special? So, I mean, if we're talking about classical singing, if we're referring to classical ideals, then I'm not sure that you would refer to Elvis's voice in that bracket. It is interesting that you can draw a parallel with classical singers and their vibrato when comparing that with Elvis, but Elvis was not a classically trained singer. But when we are talking about classically trained singers, they have that ability to put drama in their voice through control of vibrato and having an expressive vibrato that will cover, 2, 3, 4, 5 semitones. So when Elvis has this vibrato in his voice and he's covering a couple, 2, maybe 3 semitones, it makes it sound more dramatic. And classically trained singers have that ability to really give you a dramatic sounding vocal, especially when we're talking about opera singers. You can't get more dramatic than that, because it's literally what they are acting out. It is the drama of the particular story that they're performing at the time. So with Elvis, he does have that in there, but it's not that he trained to do it. He just had this natural ability to have this vibrato that was a lot wider than you would normally get in mainstream pop releases, for example. And the 8th question, which I think I've already referenced, Elvis moved through many musical genres. How well do you think he managed stylistic shifts without losing authenticity? So if we're looking at Hound Dog and Can't Help Falling in Love, you can see from left to right that this wouldn't have been, I don't think, a conscious shift for Elvis to think, oh, well, now I'm singing a song that's more rock and roll, it's more upbeat, so I'm going to have to edit my vibrato. When he's singing in Can't Help Falling in Love, you can see that he's got this wide vibrato because he's got the time to do it. But some singers will have the same vibrato even in up-tempo numbers, and they might apply it, stylistically quite a lot, but it's managing. Amazing, as we scroll through, it's managing the application of their stylizations, such as vibrato, in context for whatever they're singing. Here, look at the vibrato, and look here, how it is so, it's non-existent really in the left-hand side, and when we keep on moving through, you'll see when there is an opportunity just to hold on for a little bit, you'll get the vibrato that isn't necessarily that wide, and then looking here, straight note. But the reason that we're seeing these changes is because of the style, Hound Dog being so vastly different to Can't Help Falling in Love, but the way that he's approached it, you can see on screen, just with pitch covered and the technique of vibrato, how different it is. So he had the ability to maintain his authenticity, keep his sound, but apply that to lots of different genres, lots of different styles of song, and therefore it was always going to sound like his version of it. And by his natural application and the things that he would change, I think subconsciously, it meant that his voice would suit the song that he was given, rather than having to change a song to suit his voice. So that's a huge part of it, that great singers sound great singing lots of different genres, whereas some singers need the right song. Next question. You often analyze vocal development over an artist's lifetime. How did Elvis's voice evolve in your view? So I would say that Elvis, to begin with, and this is something that happens with lots of singers who are in demand when they have to sing a lot, they'll start off with a little bit of a cleaner tone, and as they progress, they'll start to get the option, and I think with Elvis it was an option to introduce that bit of rasp at the top end of his vocal range and that smoky quality that you get to singers' voices as they progress throughout their careers. When you listen to the Comeback Special, for example, and compare that with early recordings, you'll be able to hear the way that his voice has matured, and it's not a loss of any vocal ability. It's just something that's happened naturally, and I would say that towards the top end of his chest voice, he would lean into that rasp sound even more later on in his career, more so than he did when he was younger. And generally, yeah, hearing those early recordings, there is that cleaner quality to it. But that's just something that happens naturally with the human voice. Over the years, it will start to, take on a little bit more, you could argue, a little bit more personality, because you're hearing the year's worth of singing coming out through now a singer's voice who's been doing it for 10 years, 15 years, and you're hearing that natural progression. And final question, number 10, would you say Elvis still sets vocal standards today? If so, in what way? I think Elvis's voice is the shining example for aspiring singers nowadays to show that it's all about expression, and actually pitch is secondary. And it just so happens that when we're looking at this on screen, Elvis's voice here could not, and we're looking at one of the most listened to voices of all time, and people don't listen to a voice that much if they think it's out of key or if it's off key. So when we're looking at this, Elvis's voice is between notes, meaning he can't get further away into, when we're talking in terms of pitch, he can't get further away from one note, or the note that he should be singing, to then the next note underneath or above. So he's between notes. It means that this pitch does not exist on a piano. Now, the reason that that's important is because looking at this, if one of the most listened to voices of all time and the most popular voices of all time is between lines, then really don't worry about being on these lines all the time. The reason that he's not on these lines is because of the expression in his voice, and that's what you want to focus on. As with the greatest singers of all time, when you look at their voice, they will, like this, be really accurate on the onset of the note, sometimes D sharp 4 here, but then when you're looking at the voice throughout a whole performance, you'll see that again between notes here. So I think the fixation on perfection and tuning vocals and being calibrated to A440, if you're trying to replicate one of the best voices of all time, or you're trying to sing in a way that's totally unique and maybe become one of the best singers of all time, I would say the last thing you want to do is start tuning your voice to what everyone else is doing. And I think this is why a lot of people now are listening to very old performances and are getting so much more out of those, is because you're going to hear authentic expression.
Take my hand, take my whole life too.
When you're listening to that, I mean, even the way that it's been produced is so upfront, it's so stripped back. I know that we're listening to the isolated vocal, take in the pitch between lines, here, slightly flat, vibrato, but it's literally Elvis in front of a mic and his voice, and that's it. You can say there's a sprinkling of reverb on there, but you can connect to this voice because there's nothing getting in the way. And I think, unfortunately, nowadays, tuning can get in the way of the expression in somebody's voice, because you won't hear this anymore being between lines. So yeah, my advice would be, if there's a voice that shows it or proves it right, then it's Elvis's. That you don't have to be on lines all the time. Focus on expression, and then people will connect with your voice. And certainly Elvis had a voice that, you know, millions and billions around the world connected to. Is because he was focused on expression and putting everything that he had into a vocal performance emotionally, rather than worrying about pitch. So those are all of the questions, and thank you Graceland Magazine for getting in touch. And I mean, I am thankful that I know that Lisa Marie Presley used to watch my channel and had seen the analysis videos that I did on her dad, and that she enjoyed watching them. So for me, it's great to know that, but also to know that the videos got out there that much. And I think that if she was happy with them, then that's all I can ask for. But thank you for getting in touch and asking me these questions. It has been a pleasure to answer them for you. And yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video / interview / analysis. And keep those requests for future videos coming in the comments section below. As always, let me know what you guys think. And if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And I'll catch you guys at the next one. Rock!